diaspora, Africans on the continent, all people of African descent around the world, friends of Africa, and all inhabitants of our beloved earth. Happy Africa Day. As we celebrate Africa Day, let's reflect on what our Pan-African fathers wanted to accomplish when they met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, back in 1963. They met to discuss the possibility of an Africa that was united, an Africa that spoke with one voice, an Africa that could only defeat colonization, an Africa that could only succeed at accomplishing and winning true economic liberation through unity. Through unity, meaningful unity of purpose. Sadly, when they went to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in 1963, they were divided. We had the Casablanca group, who were Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, who said Africa for the Africans and African unity now. Sadly, they were not the majority. The others, who were the Monrovia group, they said, let's hold off on this unity thing. Let's go slow. My fellow brothers and sisters, Africa lost when the Casablanca group lost in 1963. They came out with a compromise agreement, which was the Organization of African Unity, which has since been renamed African Union. Since 1963, we have been going slow, which were the wishes of the Monrovia group. The only issue we've been able to accomplish since 1963 was the creation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is now seeing Africa going to the world stage as one customs union. The other wishes, which were the establishment of an African military, the establishment of a single currency, a single monetary policy, a single stock exchange, we have not been able to accomplish any of those building blocks for economic development. Let me remind you that at independence, African countries were given limited, and what I say in some cases, fake independence. But what was denied Africans was true economic liberation, because they understood in order for the Western world to continue to exploit Africa, economic liberation was to be denied Africans by any means necessary. Let me take you back in history, when the Africans were minding their own business and the invaders from the West descended upon them. They descended upon them and put in systems to see to it that Africa and her children were forever defeated and dominated, starting with slavery, then colonization, then the Berlin Conference, where they met for 4 months to come up with a policy on how to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. The policies they put in place back in 1884 remain alive and well in Africa today. Those policies continue to wreak havoc in Africa today. For those of you who say, oh, Berlin Conference is a thing of the past, think again. As long as we have a country called Eswatini, as long as we have a country called Togo, as long as we have a country called Malawi, even the big ones, Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, on their own, they simply cannot survive. And yet, the division of Africa was intentional, was deliberate, and was supposed to have specific desired outcomes. And those outcomes continue to be felt to this very day. They did not end there. when the children of Africa were taken to the Americas as slaves, what they were subjected to on slave plantations, following the quote-unquote freedom of the slaves, they followed up with Jim Crow. They followed up with redlining. They followed up with systematic imprisonment of Black people. They followed up with continued abuse and denial of economic advancement of Black people, no matter where you find us. Whether you find us in the Americas, whether you find us in the Caribbean, in South America, in Europe, and of course back in Africa. We are the working class, systematically relegated to be forever the working class. Back in Africa, in spite of having been given independence, the invisible hand remains alive and well. No matter how hard African countries try, yes, we have our own responsibilities to shoulder. But the bottom line is, after slavery, after colonization, after the Berlin Conference, then came the world geopolitics that set out to have systems in place that will see to it that forever people of African descent will never attain true economic liberation. I'm talking about the world financial systems, World Bank, IMF, the Bretton Woods institutions. I'm talking about the World Trade Organization, which has blatantly ignored abuses of Africa because it was created and understood that Africa will forever be providing raw materials to the Western countries to the detriment of the Africans. I'm talking about the World Health Organization, which, as you saw during COVID, Africa was left hanging.
Don't skip this video if you want to know how we all teams and support
the United Nations, an entity that is supposed to be the watchdog for human rights around the world. The 3 members of the 5-member UN Security Council are some of the biggest abusers of human rights through slavery. Slavery, which is yet another war crime that no one is yet to be prosecuted. Colonization, which is a war crime to which no one is yet to be prosecuted. There is a need for these war crimes to be referred to the ICC. What is the United Nations doing about this situation? The watchdog for human rights violations, at the realm of it, are 3 countries that are the biggest perpetrators of human rights violations in the history of mankind. And by that, I'm referring to slavery. All other nations, all other races that have been wronged, the Japanese, the American Indians, the Jews, you name it, they have been compensated. Reparations have been paid, and yet the biggest crime ever committed on any group of people through slavery, the people have never been compensated. The issue of reparations is way past due. One then looks back and says, as a people, why is it that we have failed to push back against these blatant abuses? Some of the most egregious ones, for example, the European nations that continue to refuse to retain the remains of our ancestors because they were classified as trophies of conquest. To this very day, evidence of murder, they refuse to return the remains of our ancestors for proper burial, just to give them simple human decency. United Nations sits back and watch this, and they say nothing. The artifacts, priceless artifacts which were stolen out of Africa, they don't deny it. Oh yes, we stole them, but we're not returning them. They're nicely displayed in their museums throughout Europe. Some are still in basements, not yet displayed. They simply refused to give them up. Where else could this level of abuse occur except in Africa? Where else could the people also collectively fail to demand that what is right be done? It's because they defeated us where it matters the most, the mind. The mind is where they defeated us, where we have this inherent fear of those who don't look like us. My brothers and sisters, how long are we going to continue to allow those from the West, and now joined by those from the East, to continue to abuse us, to continue to exploit us? You see, you got to remember, when they invaded Africa, they invaded us as a continent. When they enslaved us as Africans. When they colonized us as Africans. When they exploit us, they exploit us as the continent, as individual countries. You take it to the next level. When we were taken away to the faraway lands as slaves, they enslaved us as Black people. Even within the plantations, they divided us. They continued to use the rule of divide and conquer, and still they succeed at keeping us where they want us to be through using us as groups, putting systems in place as groups. Therefore, it only makes sense that if we are to undo what they are doing, we can only succeed if we also push back as groups. Small groups, if you are in a school situation, be it a university, come together as Black students and fight your issues together, united. At the workplace, a group of Black people, come together, fight for your issues, for your rights, united. As countries, come together, fight as a country and push back. As regions, be it the Caribbean, South America, in Africa, come together and fight these wars at every level as groups of us Black people. That is how they defeated us. That is how we are going to defeat them. I'm talking about unity of purpose. This moment, my brothers and sisters, is calling for unity of purpose. The abuse of Black people around the world has got to come to an end. We can no longer continue to accept the status they put us in to be the world working class to perpetuity. I refuse to accept that. As a Black woman, I refuse that. As a mother, as a grandmother, I refuse to leave this world the way it is for my children, grandchildren, and generations to come. Something must be done. And it starts with you taking that ownership, taking that responsibility to wake each other up, to educate ourselves, to understand the genesis of why we are where we are as a people. We must come together, just like other races have done. Unity of purpose is what this moment is calling for. So as we reflect and celebrate Africa Day, let's make our ancestors proud. Let's pick up where they left when they fought the wars of resistance and resisted occupation, but lost because they were using bows and arrows. We have a responsibility to pick up where they left. We are the ones who brought humans into this world. The tallest pedestal belongs to us. We have given it up. It is time for us to reclaim it. Justice for all. We must come together and demand a world that is free of racism, bigotry, and hate. We must demand a world that is righteous, free, and fair. So as a united African people, we're calling upon all righteous, peace-loving members of our beautiful earth to simply demand a better world. And once again, a world that is free of racism, a world that is free of bigotry, and a world that is free of hate. But more importantly, a world that must treat Africans and her children around the world fairly. It's what the rest of you non-Africans would want. We're simply asking you to do unto us as you want done unto you. Happy Africa Day, my brothers and sisters.